You know how sometimes you meet someone and you just know you're supposed to have a deeper conversation with them? That was me with Laurel Crossley. Hi, I'm Kathy Baldwin, and you have arrived at Unlearn the Crap and Level Up Your Soul is Calling. I want to tell you why this conversation is so amazing. Because the first time I heard Laurel talk about infant mental health, something in me lit up. Because honestly, who talks about mental health of babies, toddlers, or even unborn children? We focus so much on adults healing their trauma. But what if we understood how it all starts? Here's the wild part. The egg that created you was already in existence inside your grandmother. That means that we're carrying not only her DNA, but also the chemistry, emotions, and energy she experienced. Think about that for a second. 2 generations of information, beliefs, and stress patterns shaping who we are and who we're going to become before we're even conceived. That's why this conversation with Laurel felt so important. If we could truly understand how our brains are wired, how stress, play, and love shape us from the very beginning, maybe we could raise a generation of people that don't have to spend half their life unlearning their crap. This episode will open your eyes to the science and the soul of it. How play, mindfulness, and maternal calm can literally rewire a child's brain. I absolutely loved this conversation, and I know you will too. So let's settle in, take a deep breath, and let's dive in. Welcome to Unlearn the Crap and Level Up. Let's get started.
Welcome to Unlearn the Crap TV with your host, Kathy Baldwin. Unlearn the Crap TV is more than just a show. It's a movement towards breaking free from the disempowering structures designed to benefit the few at the expense of the many. It's about education, healing, and unlearning the detrimental beliefs that have been ingrained in society for generations. So now, please welcome the host of Unlearn the Crap TV, Kathy Baldwin.
Welcome to another episode of Unlearn the Crap and Level Up Your Soul is Calling. I'm your host, Kathy Baldwin. As you know, or if you are new and don't know, crap is conditioned responses and automatic programming. It is what changes our thoughts, our feelings, and our beliefs. It is our autopilot that puts us into an automatic mode where we are not operating from our prefrontal, our intellectual part of our brain. It does affect every aspect of our body, from our heart to our gut microbiome. It affects our health, our wealth, our prosperity, and our relationships. Today's conversation, I am beyond excited to share with you because we are going to hit some amazing topics about mental health and how it affects our children. But before we get started, Laurel, could you please tell us what crap you needed to unlearn so that you could level up?
Well, that's a loaded question, Kathy. There's so much unlearning I have done in the past. I don't know. I'm a woman over the age of 60 who has been through a lot. I went through a lot in 5 years. And I think the biggest thing I had to unlearn is I don't need to be no stinking caretaker for the planet. That's my big one.
Whoa, we got a lot to unpack there because you and me and probably half the population are going through that same unlearning. But before we go into that conversation, Laurel, could you please tell our audience who you are and who you're serving and how you're serving the world now that you've unlearned that crap?
Absolutely. So I've taken a journey back to my roots, and my roots are in children, working with kids and children's mental health. In fact, it goes even deeper than children's mental health. It goes back to infant mental health, which for a long time, research and the mental health community sort of poo pooed that there's no such thing as infant mental health, or what's that, or wow, that's confusing. A lot of research is going into that. But even before that, we want to look at maternal mental health when the child is in utero. So it's really about supporting mothers who are pregnant and children. I always say 0 to 6. They're my sweet spot. That's where, when we give children the tools to be able to support their own mental health, and it goes way beyond that. We're talking about whole child wellness. So, mental health, spiritual well being, which I define as self esteem and self worth. It goes to physical well being. But if we support children through mental health promotion strategies in those early learning years, in those infant years, and support mom, what we are actually doing is we are changing the way that our bodies respond, or these young children's bodies respond to stress or potential stress. And so that is my heart space and my complete and utter devotion and dedication.
I love what you are doing because if we can help mothers understand the impact, parents understand how our brains evolve, we're going to have less crap to unlearn.
Absolutely. And I'm not talking about really hard things to learn. I'm talking about simple play based strategies that we all need. It's not just children, adults need to play. You know that. And
Yeah.
so, that's what we're talking about. We are talking about simple, 2 to 5 minutes. When the scene gets the scene outside of you gets a little overwhelming, that you can do. It's simple. Like I'm astounded at how well it works.
Well, before we get into the strategies, let's go back in time. How did this evolve for you that this became such a passion for you? Because I truly believe that our zone of genius, our purpose, our all of that exists on the exact polar opposite of our challenges. So I know you have to have an amazing story that brought you to this incredibly important work.
Well, let's start when I was about 2 years of age. At 2 years of age, well, it would have been earlier than two. When my first word was baby.
Mm.
And so I have adored children, even when I was little. Children younger than myself. I had a younger brother. Well, I have a younger brother, not had, but he was just shy. He was 23 months. I was 23 months when he was born. So my world revolved around him, and I started to nurture and nourish him. So that's where it all started. So, I would feed him. My mom said, like, I just couldn't get enough of this baby. And
Well,
then,
I ask, are you the oldest child?
no, I'm the middle child.
Huh.
And my older brother, was at school. So there was a big age gap between my older brother and I, versus my younger brother and I. So my older brother wasn't home. He was at school. So that was my first clue that I knew that I was going to do something special with children. The second thing that happened is then I went to school. And what I would do is I would come home every day and I would set up my stuffed animals and my dolls, and my parents had bought me a blackboard, this huge one, and I would come home and I would teach my toys, my stuffed animals, anything that I learned at school that day, I would teach. So there weren't really any children in our neighborhood, or I would have roped them into getting some lessons for sure. And my younger brother was a bit, he was a bit different than me. He was outside running around and he was quite noisy. So he was not an ideal student for me. So I preferred the students that I could handle. In fact, in my office right now, there are some students in here. I have some of my toys because my office is filled with toys and mementos from my childhood. So that is the other foray. I knew I wanted to teach. I knew that I wanted to be with children. And as I grew up, you know, you go to the mall with your friends, right? Because they were looking for cute boys. Do you know what I was looking for? Cute babies.
Mm.
And I would talk to the children. My first job was babysitting, as I think every young female, that was their first job, unless they had a dad who was, you know, had a business, or a mom who had a business, and then they do something for their dad or mom. But that was really the time that I started to explore. And then as I went through college or university, I decided that, you know, actually I wanted to be an early childhood educator. Let me backtrack even further. So I was all ready, applied to college, ready to get my early childhood education designation because I really wanted to work with the really littles. And then a teacher and one of my fellow students from high school said, no, you need to go to university and you need to become a teacher. Like, you need to get certified as a teacher. And at the time, it was a 4-year thing. You got your undergraduate degree, and then you went in and you did a year of teacher's college. I did it. I didn't really enjoy it that much. There was a lot of things I didn't like about it, about some of my coursework, like why'd I have to take science? Why couldn't I just do education classes, where I did very well? And so it didn't really suit me well. And let's face it, I was young and away from home. So I had a good time. And so
which is part of the process.
Yes,
that's part of it.
That's right. Yeah. And let's face it as well. High school was a breeze for me. So I didn't really work too hard. I did a lot of theater. I did really well in high school, or I thought I did really well in high school. My teachers all loved me. Then I went to university. It was a whole different ball game. And I wasn't set up to be a university student. My older brother is the type who should have graduated from university, but it was me. But I paid for my own education, so that was my justification on doing that. But when I graduated, I couldn't get into teacher's college. And I was literally devastated to the point where I was struggling with horrific panic attacks. Horrific. My panic attacks and my worry and my anxiety are all around career. They're not around, the worry that, the world's going to fall apart. It was all about career, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I cried, and I had panic, and I just freaked out. I applied, I think, maybe 10 times to get into teacher's college. And every single time was no, no, no. I was devastated because my whole life had been about education. Like, I had experience from the age of 5. Like, I had 15 years already of training, on the job training in my bedroom. They didn't care. It was all about your grades. It was all about grades. In fact, at the time when I applied, I don't know if it's still the same, it was more difficult to get into teacher's college than it was to get into medical school.
Wow. At
the time. And so that was my first That was my first I don't know what I'm going to do with my life.
Can I just challenge something you just said?
Yes.
Because is it possible that you needed to experience mental health issues with anxiety and stress so that you could be directed to this amazing expertise that you're now in? That you needed that experience?
Could be. Could very well be. My mother had the same thing. She didn't tell me. My whole family is riddled with panic and anxiety around different things. So there's that DNA piece to it. I'll call it the DNA piece, where many of us maybe like we didn't talk about stuff like this. This was the 60s and the 70s. Nobody talked about their mental health. But what my mom shared with me when I told her about my first panic attack was that she was agoraphobic. She could not leave the house when we were young. But she didn't
Wow.
tell us anything. So it wasn't until I had my first mental health experience and I told her what was going on. And she said, yes, I know what you're talking about. And then she shared her experience with me. And so now when I have conversations with my brothers, I know that that's too is something that was going on in their lives. And then when I talk to my mom's brother, my uncle, he had debilitating panic attacks. And then when I talked to his daughter, so my cousin, she had debilitating panic attacks and worries. So it's all in our family, lots of mental health stuff. But because we didn't talk about it, nothing gets done.
Well,
No.
we were raised in a time and place where anything that did not appear to be perfect to the outside world was to be hidden behind closed doors. And what happened behind closed doors was never talked about. And so you carried the shame of the public image and then the personal reality that most people did not know how to integrate. And so we were walking around as Jekyll and Hydes.
Yes, and men certainly did not show they had any struggles. Like they were supposed to be the pillar of strength in the community. They were supposed to be the pillar of strength at home. The other thing, if I go back to my early childhood, which also supports the concept that you just described, that I had to go through this, I was painfully shy. I did not speak, which people today, because I'm up on the stage talking about my work and doing these performances, and people think that's not true. That's not you. But yes. And the reason I know that I was so shy is I needed to observe my fellow students. I needed to observe these children. I was almost doing, I want to say, my own scientific experiment at the age of 5 to right through till 14.
Well,
And
you were honing your zone of genius
yes, and I
by
was
going
looking at
inward.
them.
Yeah.
Yes, and looking at these children and making mental notes about them, and I just loved school so much. I found it difficult, but I loved it. And I loved the idea that there were all these different little beings in there that were all so unique and all had these amazing skills and all had some limitations. And so, I'm sure I was categorizing them all into little groups. Like there's the quiet ones and there's the noisy ones. And the noisy ones really fascinated me because I always thought, wow, I'd like to be like that. The noisy ones. And my dad was very loud. He was a very loud man, like loud, like him and his family, loud. And so, to be really quiet, now I'm loud or louder.
Yeah.
Well, not louder. I'd say energetically louder as opposed to physically louder,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And able to zoom in, swoop in, and say something, and it changes the trajectory of someone's life.
Yeah.
That's my other gift, is just looking at it through a sort of that global up above the planet kind of thing, seeing all the interconnections and saying, well, what about this? And so problem solving as well. And I used to watch the teachers too, because I knew who I wanted to be like and I knew who I didn't want to be like. So those teachers, little did they know, they were my role model, more so than my parents were. More so than my parents were. And so one of the things that I think is we really need to look at is, who are the role models in our children's lives? And can we assign them someone who can be that source of inspiration other than parents? Because parents have a different role than a role model.
Yeah. Have you ever read the book, The Outliers?
No.
Okay. In there, they talk about when there's people who are zones of genius and they are living within that, and they talk about how that evolved. And there were a lot of different case studies in this book, but the one that I cannot get out of my head was the Renaissance era. The Renaissance era produced more artists, especially in the Italy area, than any other time in history. And when they looked at why, it was because children, once they had an artistic expression seen, the parents sent them to live with the artists so that they were immersed in this world. And I've always thought what an amazing world we would live in if we're just what our parents, our caregivers, our environment was shaped around to nurture our genius.
Well, that's the way, our education system right now is going through a massive breakup.
Yeah, like every
Remember?
other system
Yeah.
in our world right now. Yeah.
Yes, the society is changing so rapidly, and if you're attached to the old ways, you're not going to survive. And so the children just don't belong to the education system. What I would love to see is that, in the education system, children spend, right from the age of 5, spend half a day learning in their school, and then the other half of the day figuring out what their zones of genius is, with mentors, with peer mentors, with adults in the community, so that they can nourish the skills that they come to this earth with. I believe you're born with purpose. I don't believe you find it.
Absolutely.
I believe you're born with it. For me, two things came out with because I have a class called Playing with Purpose. And so one of the things that came out is that my intuitive spiritual side of self has to come out more. And the second thing is, if I'm not teaching, I'm not living. And I knew that right from the beginning. And when I was between the ages of 2 and 4, I used to talk to spirits. And so that too contributed to my sensitivity in school, because all these little beings brought their own spirits with them. If you believe that sort of thing, I do, because I was part of it, a participant in it. And so for me, those two skill sets are all my purpose. They're my purpose.
Okay, so I want to. There's so many ways that we could take this conversation, because I do want to talk about. I do want to talk about the neurology. I do want to talk about the ancestral DNA, the chemical compounds that go into neuro programming our brains, and all of that, and how we come into this world. But there are a lot of people who come into this world with their own purpose, their own zone of genius, and they are born into an environment of shoulds and expectations that are opposite with who they are. There are cultures that only value high academia, doctors, lawyers, these professions, instead of skilled hand, artistic, kinesiology type skills. There's also different personality types that are expected to showcase in certain areas. What is happening to that child's brain when they are living in this cognitive dissonance of what their internal world is and their external world?
Oh, you mean like my life?
Most of us, yes.
Well, what happens is, um, so in my family, the thing that was really important, there were two things: reading, which I excelled at. My imaginative mind is like beyond, like I am a writer. And my family appreciated reading. So I always took like the gifted reading programs and always put into gifted reading stuff. And it's because I could live in my imagination and I could visualize, I could see the stories. And I mean, most people say they can see the stories, but like I could smell smells and taste what they were eating and just go in and do that. Now I'm going to forget your question because I'm off on a tangent here. But my family
What
loved.
happens to that infant's brain when they're in an environment that is trying to get them to conform rather than self-express? Because I believe
Well,
most breakdowns that are happening and the unlearning that we're doing is coming back to self.
well, there's a couple of things here. So you said the word infancy. So if we look at infants, are we managing their behavior? Absolutely. When an infant is born, all we're doing is taking care of their needs. They are in that egocentric state because they are helpless. Well, helpless. They need to be diapered. They need to be fed. They need to be, they need to be stimulated. They need to play. They need to socialize. They need to do these things. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're we want the children to self-actualize. That's the highest
Yeah.
level that we can get to. But if those needs are not met,
Yep.
then we have some serious ramifications. So if a child grows up with no stimulation, no nourishment, no or in poverty, no housing, the safety and security, those primal needs are not met. And that starts and changes and shifts a child's brain
Oh, oh,
so dramatically, it doesn't grow like a traditional brain. What I mean is it's smaller in size. The more stress that you place on an infant, even in utero, if that baby is connected to the mother, which it is, and the mother is in a stressful situation, that baby will not grow the same way and its brain comes out. I took an infant mental health course and it showed the difference between a stressed out brain of an infant that they took an MRI of and a regular brain. And the difference was so dramatic. Now, that high stressful situation it was horrific. Like it was abuse, abuse, abuse. So if we can calm mother down, then what that does is it lowers all her stress hormones.
yes.
And
That
when
is
we
the
lower
critical thing.
her,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
when we
That is
lower
something
hers,
critical that I really want us to hone in on.
okay.
We talk about stress in adults. We talk about burnout, being in a high stressful environment. Um, but stress is a chemical, and chemicals are absorbed by our cells. And I use me as a case study so that I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. But my mother was a teenage pregnant girl who, in the 60s, was forced to get married. She was filled with shame and blame and what is wrong with you? And how did you let this happen to you? And here was this amazing, intelligent woman who was now forced into a box because of a circumstance. And I came into this world always with the belief that I didn't belong and I needed to prove my existence. That's what you're talking about, right?
It is so multifaceted. It is so like it is, there's so much to this that we are just tapping into what the effects of this are. In fact, when I was sitting in this class, witnessing the and hearing the content from the professors, I was there with a colleague and we looked at each other. She said, well, we might as well throw out the children because we've all screwed up. And we started to laugh because it's true. Like, you think about our stress, the cause, or not the cause, the effect of our stress levels in the home have such a profound effect on our children. So yes, there are some neurochemical things going on. There are also some societal things going on. There are also some physical things going on. If you're not getting the proper nutrients, like, I don't know if your mother was able to breastfeed you or whether she was looking after herself when she was pregnant with you because she was 16. We now know that a child's brain is not fully developed until they're age 25. So your mother was literally a child giving birth to a child. And we know that they're incapable of doing so unless they have a super strong support system available to them. That can happen today, but in the 60s and 70s, the only solution that your grandmother and grandfather, if they were together, would say is, you have to get married because of the shame.
Yep.
So your mother, poor mental health, I don't know about her physical health, but there you are, this poor little thing bebopping around in her tummy, and you have no chance and no choice to really flourish. When my mother was pregnant with me, she had lost a baby a year and a half before, and there was a devastating death in the family of her brother-in-law who was 18 and killed in a horrific car crash. She lost her baby shortly around there. So when I came in, my mother was trying to deal with that. It had just happened. Yeah. And so I'm not surprised and now there's all this research about labor and delivery. So let's look at your example. Your mom is a 16-year-old, big, wide-eyed, no life experience, goes into a hospital to deliver a baby, and she's only sick. Maybe she didn't go into a hospital. Maybe she went to a clinic. I don't know. She was only 16.
She went into the hospital, and my father was not allowed on that floor.
Yes, that's normal.
Yeah, my father was not. He said that he had to stay in the public area of the lobby while my mother labored, but yet she was allowed to smoke right up into going into the operation room. So
welcome
there
to
she
the
was alone. Yeah. Yeah, so she was alone and isolated, 16 years old. And
can you imagine? The nurses and doctors wouldn't have held back at that time. She wouldn't have been supported. They would have been chastising her, right?
She was business, yeah.
Right? Because society frowned upon that. You wait till you get married to do those kinds of things. What's a 16-year-old girl doing in here with a baby and all this other stuff, right? So so there's internal factors that affect children's mental health, and there's external factors. We are now,
Yep.
there's a lot of discussion and dialogue around the birth process. My daughter was born under horrific conditions. And she was my first. And so, and what I mean by that is all sorts of terrible things happened. Different with my son. My daughter absolutely had mental health issues, right? Like I saw them present in children, in my child at the age of probably 2 or 3. And so that's the thing about infant mental health and children's mental health. It's not until the age of 6 that we can actually do an official diagnosis. However,
Mhm.
in conversations with colleagues of mine who work in the early childhood education arena or support early childhood education or schools, um, they're saying that what's most important for all of us is to be the observer of our children. That's how we notice whether or not someone is securely attached. There's a lot of insecure attachment out there. COVID did a number on those children that were home that are now in grade 1 and 2. We're seeing all sorts of issues with reading and language because they didn't get the supports in those formative years, like reading and education and classroom experience. There's some social stuff going on because they were with their parents during COVID. And the parents aren't equipped to teach. So I have an idea for a workshop that's been in my brain for a long time. I want to talk about baby burnout. We are actually burning out our children by putting
Oh,
unrealistic expectations on our children's education in their communities. Like we have lost the ability to play with our children and have play as the strategy that will be enough. We don't have to put them into 15 extracurricular sports and put them at this high level where there's undue pressure on a child whose brain is growing and shifting. We need to slap the cell phones, slap the tablets out of children's hands. And in fact, I've been hearing that we should not be allowing any child under the age of 12 to have a device
wow.
because they are not able to get that secure sense of who they are, which I say is the spirit of the child. If you're comparing yourself to Kim Kardashian, and nothing against Kim Kardashian, but if that's the body type, these young girls as young as 7 and 8 are talking about, and it's young men too. You have no muscle, you're too fat, you're really dumb, you're really ugly, your hair is funny. Like they're saying these unkind things that when I was growing up, people said stuff like that, but then a teacher would say, knock it off. But we didn't have a device. We weren't looking at, and we have no filters. So these children can look at all sorts of horrific things online through TikTok, Instagram, all these real Facebook. Well, they're not on Facebook, but all these reels come from somewhere, and they are seeing horrific things like people being killed, violence. They're
So
seeing surgeries.
what
They're
is
seeing things they shouldn't be exposed to.
what is that doing to the brain as the brain is forming? Is it normalizing trauma? Is it desensitizing?
Both. And they're not able to articulate or to understand because they don't have life experience, because their brains aren't fully formed, and they're being exposed to things they should never be exposed to, ever. Even conversations in the household. Children should not be exposed to, like when there was a killing. Well, there's always killings in the US, but the fact that the media
Three.
jumps.
Three just
Yeah,
happened on the weekend.
there you go. And so parents are talking about it, and it puts their stress levels up. So, we are seeing things on a global perspective that we never were exposed to as children. So if you think I had mental health issues as a child, if I'd been exposed to all of that stuff, I don't know if I'd still be here. That's a pretty hard thing to say, but I would have found it so overwhelming that I don't think I could have lived. That's a
Oh,
really shocking thing for me to say, but it's so
yeah.
it's too much. It's
Well,
too much.
we are seeing increased mental health across all ages. We are seeing teenagers taking their own lives. We are seeing all of this. And I want to make sure that we go to the solution, because I believe, and the purpose of this podcast is that if we all come back to ourselves, if we come back to who we authentically are, we become aligned internally. I believe we can end poverty and war and famine and all the other things, because we're not living in this place. So you kept talking about play as the solution. How do we integrate this? I know you and I could be talking for hours and days, and there's so much more to unpack, but let's really go to this concept of play.
So, for years, we've talked about the importance of play for our children. It's get them outside, smell the fresh air, wheel your baby around outside, talk to them about the leaves and describe things and expose them to the outdoors. We're not doing it as adults. The number one role model in a child's life is the same-sexed parent. And so when you're parenting, it is so important that you're playing. It's not about the device. It's about disengaging from work. There is no job in this world that is that important, unless you're being called into an emergency and you have to do emergency surgery, or you're a first responder. But really, your work is not that important. At the end of the day, when you leave this earth, no one at your job is going to care. they're literally they're literally going to replace you. You're replaceable. So what's not replaceable are those moments and times with your children, your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren. You must spend time. And what it does for adults, play with children, it makes you young. That's the fountain of youth. It's not sitting with a bunch of seniors talking about the good old days, because I'm in that seniors bracket now, I think. It is about all community. It's about connecting with all community. It's about having conversations with children, no matter how young they are. Infants love conversation. They love to watch your face. Those social cues are so important in brain growth. So, playing with your children, yes. Teaching children how to express emotions so that when they're upset, you're not shushing them. You're saying, okay, what's the source of this? Why are you upset? Tell me what's going on. Was there a situation? And what's that big emotion? And now, where do you feel it in your body? And now, what can we do to support you? Because right there, you're teaching resiliency to children. You're asking them to identify the emotion, what's the situation that caused it, how they express it, where they feel it in their body, and then what's the solution. And I always ask parents when I'm talking to them, when was the last time you asked your child what they thought the solution was? And all the parents go, what? Because they figure they have to get the solution for themselves. No, they know what works for them, but your children are little independent beings. They have different thoughts on what works for them. Sometimes people say, I want to eat a chocolate bar. Sometimes they'll say, I need to go outside. Sometimes they'll say, I need to play with my brother or my sister. Sometimes they'll say, I just want to ride my bike. Sometimes they'll say, I just want to go into my room and be by myself. So it's giving children an opportunity to share their feelings, and it's such a simple strategy. The caveat to that is parents need to do this.
And
Parents
I
share.
need us to really hone in on this concept, because I was a couple of years ago, or a year ago, whatever, I was interviewed on a PBS TV show called Recipe for Wellness. And the host, Sanjay, was talking about him as an MMA fighter, and how he was pushed beyond to learn resilience. And I remember challenging him and saying, what if you didn't need to be pushed to learn resilience, but you learned how to identify your strategies at a young age so that you could make a conscious choice to expand your resiliency and know that that was what was happening. And that's what you just described. That was so beautiful, that instead of pushing to develop resilience through stress and through external circumstances, we teach how to identify it ourselves. I need this. I want that. I feel this.
So easy, right? And just use your senses. And we are always, as parents, we're always pushing our own agenda because we have to be somewhere at a certain time. So get out of the house. I remember the day when my son was 6 and I was frustrated because he wouldn't do his homework. This is a big thing for parents. And I finally looked at him. I made a decision when he was at school. He came home. I said, okay, it's time for your homework. And he said, okay. And I said, we're doing things a little different. I'm going to put the timer on. I've set you up with a snack. There's all the tools you need. And you're going to do 20 minutes worth of homework. But I'm going to be doing my own thing over here because I've already been to school and I've already done this work. I don't need to repeat grade 1. And he went, oh, because my daughter was totally independent, but he was not. And I went, what am I doing? I'm not arguing with him anymore. He was like 6 or 7, so grade 1 or 2. And that's how I got him to do his homework. I just put the timer on and said, timer time. Okay, go. Mm-hmm. And when you're done that, you can go outside to play with the neighborhood kid, if that's what you want to do. Or you can watch a little television. And it was that simple. And I did not fight because my work ethic is different than his. He's 26 now and he's 6'4". He's a big boy. His work ethic is fantastic. Both my kids have this tremendous work ethic. Like, people are worried that their children, if they don't push them, they're not going to be these great workers. My kids work harder than any of their friends. I have to say that. And they're shooting through the ladder of their respective workplaces. I'm telling you. And I didn't push them. I didn't show them. I got angry, yes. But, I parented them, but I was a facilitative parent.
I love that word.
Right. So if they were struggling with something, I'd say, I'm not making that decision. You need to make that decision. Here's how things work in the adult world when you're trying to make a difficult decision like this. And here's what my thoughts are. So go away and then come back and we'll talk about it. We'll see what you've come up with. Man, they're independent. Oh my, it's to the point where they're so independent, they're stubborn. Damn.
But that is the beauty of raising people and our education system. I'm so happy that it is in a transition, because we were taught how to be identical, how to be replaceable instead of unique. We were funneled through a system of conformity. Laurel, there are so many things that we could talk about, and I have loved every second of this conversation. I know that you facilitate, you were talking about workshops. Could you please tell the audience how they can get more of you and how you serve the world? Because I know that they're going to want more of this conversation from you, just like I do.
It's so interesting because I'm in a state of transition right now. So it's like, ooh, what have I got as offers? I run a couple of specific master classes. So they can go to my website, www.laurelcrossley.com. And there's 2 sections, children's classes and there's adult classes. So you'll see education as the tab, and you click on either one of those and it'll tell you what I'm doing. My very favorite thing that I'm focusing on right now is a program that I developed many years ago called Meditating Munchkins. And it is actually teaching children 0 to 6 the fundamentals of mindfulness and meditation through play-based activities. So much fun. So tiring, but at the end of the day, done so much work. And the youngest has been 18 months that I've done this work with. Can you get them to do this? Yes. You're not teaching them how to meditate for 6 hours. You're literally showing them some strategies on going from full throttle to shh, full throttle to shh, and breath work. And it's really cute and it's so much fun.
So you're teaching empowerment? That they're not a victim of their emotions, that they know how to turn it on and off and self-regulate?
I won't use any of that terminology. What I'm teaching them is, because I look at the educators and they need help. Our educators need help right now. So if I can show the children and demo them to the adults that are there, the teachers, the educators that are there, and I can demo these strategies, the children remember it. And I use all sorts of play things. Like I use puppets and I use little tools for breath work. Like I use all these play-based things, and there's always stories. Children love stories. So incorporating the stories into these items is so critical and crucial. Storytelling is a fabulous way to support mental health in children. There's so many lessons, and the adults. Like I've had many teachers try and steal my puppets and take them home with them because they love them. They're like, I need to have this puppet. I need to have this stuffy. So tools that are just, sort of easy to acquire are what's happening, or what's an easy thing for people to purchase, and they're not expensive, and parents can use them and educators can use them. And, it's fabulous. So go to my website. There's lots of things there. I have a Playing with Purpose program, as well as a Playing with Purpose masterclass that's free. I just finished one last week. I haven't populated the calendar yet, but people can just register, and it's all pre-recorded so that they can get the class. It's fun. It's fun. And that's me.
Thank you so much for what you do, for the impact that you're making, for how you have exemplified what is possible through your own experience. You say that children learn by stories. Well, that's what this podcast is about. And you sharing your own personal stories and your own journey has made a huge difference. And I want to say thank you so much for your time, your expertise. And I hope everybody reaches out to you so that we can end or reduce. I know we can't end it because it's part of the human experience, but if we can reduce the amount of crap that we need to unlearn, imagine the world that we'll create.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, Laurel, it has been my joy, my pleasure. Thank you so very much. And for those of you who are listening, I hope you take Laurel's words to heart and add play and joy into your life. Step away from the computer and work and the shoulds and go out and live life. And remember to challenge everything so that you can achieve anything. This has been another episode of Unlearn the Crap and Level Up. Your soul is calling. And I'm your host, Kathy Baldwin. Until next time, thanks for being with us. Thank you for listening to the Unlearn the Crap and Level Up podcast. If this conversation spoke to you, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and leave a review. That simple act helps amplify this important work of unlearning the crap that holds us back. This show is built on the foundation of my 3 books, Unlearn the Crap and Level Up, Your Soul is Calling, a roadmap to release what no longer serves you. How I unlearned my crap, which is my raw story of breaking free and the patterns that I needed to unlearn. And the third book, The Unlearned Life, an AI-powered ritual system for truth transformation and personal empower. If you're a podcaster or you want to be, this is for you because 85% of podcasts fail, not because of the message isn't powerful enough, but because the back end can be overwhelming. I created the Finally Podcast automation system so your voice doesn't become a statistic. Your message is too important to be silenced by burnout, tech chaos, or even wasted time. My mission is to support not only my guests and you, the audience, but also every podcaster who's ready to level up. So until next time, keep unlearning, keep leveling up,